Hello, I am Skippy Mesereau, coach, former elected official, and lifelong public servant. Welcome to Healing Our Politics, the show that shows you, the heart-centered leader, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. Now, while recording this show, I have encountered so many amazing leaders just like yourself doing incredible work, and I have wanted to feature all of you on the show, but there has simply not been the time or budget. So today we are trying something a little bit different. Welcome to the Healing Our Politics episode-lette, an ultra-focused, super condensed new format, just 15 minutes of goodness with leaders just like yourself, designed to showcase your good works and introduce you to our audience and our audience to each other. Welcome. Consider these episodes the appetizer, the amuse-bouche to the Healing Our Politics meal. If you like the taste, slip into our DMs on Instagram, email us through the website, or leave a comment below, and we will use your feedback to determine who gets brought back for the full deep dive, the tasting menu experience on a future Healing Our Politics episode to come. So sit back, relax, and pay attention because this one is coming at you fast. Monica.
Hey, how's it going?
Good morning, good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm hoping this is coming through okay. I've got like a really hacked together setup here.
Me too. I'm like learning how IG Live works at the moment, and it's not great. I've got a stopwatch on my left. There's a cup of coffee over here. This is just how it's going today.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, obligatory welcome to the Healing Our Politics podcast, the show that shows you, the heart-centered leader, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. And this is our first ever episode-lette, our first mini episode. Honestly, it's such an honor to just be here with you. I adore your work. I listen to every podcast that you're on, and I just love the way that you show up in the world. So it's really an honor to start this series with you.
Yeah, thank you for everything you do. It's just we need all hands on deck. We really do.
We really do. So for people who are going to watch this who aren't familiar with you, I wondered if you would start with just a brief intro. So who are you? What's on your heart? And then how do you choose to serve in this world?
Oof, fun way to ask. I am Monica Guzeman. I'm the author of a book called I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. Mouthful. I am senior fellow at Braver Angels, which is the nation's largest cross-partisan nonprofit working to depolarize America. It's a grassroots movement, and we've got our work cut out for us. I am the host of A Braver Way podcast, which tries to equip people with the tools they need to bridge the political divide in their everyday lives and confront the barriers in their way. And what's in my heart is how many barriers there are. Lots of them. It can feel demoralizing and dispiriting, and then I remember how powerful we actually are and how one of the biggest barriers we have is forgetting that.
Yeah. And what I'm reminded of over and over again in my day-to-day work is that those things that we perceive as roadblocks when we choose are actually our building blocks. Yeah, like
Oftentimes. They don't look it, but
take them and stack them and step one step higher. It's really how it works. And so we do have a lot of building material these days.
Yeah, that's
Yes. So if I'm listening, or just for me, like why should I care about getting to know people who think, act, believe differently than I do politically?
Okay. Because our broad failure to do so is normalizing a politics that we don't deserve and that is hurting us. Because trying to change people who disagree, rather than getting to know them and therefore understanding them, doesn't work and is not what will fix things.
Yeah.
Because they actually do have big things to teach you that you do not know, and you are dead wrong about them in many, many deep ways. Because seeing things through many angles reveals more beauty and truth.
Yeah. So on the show, on A Braver Way, my favorite part, and I'm normally the guy, I love podcasts, but I'm normally the one when there's like the after the podcast part, I just tune out, right? So I think of like Armchair Expert, love it, but love you, Monica, other Monica, but like, I don't listen to the recap, right? But my favorite part of A Braver Way is when you and April really get into kind of co-evaluating what came up, because I think it brings up these really great insights. Is April a person like that for you, or did you always have like a pre-existing relationship such that you didn't have to kind of get to know her through the differences?
I got to know her through the common work we do. We both come from different sides of the political spectrum into believing that we need to do a better job of understanding each other across differences. So that's how we built trust. That's how I got to see how gloriously, incredibly empathetic she is. Wow, she sees things about humankind that I want to internalize. And so I learned so much from her about life, let alone politics, let alone the issues. So yeah, on more than one occasion, it's been like, I need to talk to someone. I need to talk to April. I need to talk to April about this. It will help me. It will help me understand how I feel. It will help me crystallize and contrast and go deeper on something that's making me mad.
Yeah.
But that's become quite a nourishing friendship for me.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the episode that you guys did on abortion. One of many issues that, gets amplified in the news media as an either or.
Right.
And in hearing you guys kind of volley back and forth these like very heartfelt human perspectives, I found myself in the awkward position of being like, I agree with all of this.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And that's one of the shocks that you get when you get close enough to actually see what's there. Because a lot of times we stay far away because we're just so sure that what's there is horrible and is going to hurt and is certainly not going to be fun. And it's all these things. And then you actually do it. And there are moments of serious upset, but they are balanced by the levity that comes from two human beings who actually want to connect on some level. And that softens everything. So one of the things that comes out of that is the realization that we're not as far apart as we think. Yeah. That actually makes sense to me. I don't like where it's led you, and that's not where it's going to lead me, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And how that changes the equation.
Yeah, I think many people, and I certainly used to have this fear, glad to say I don't anymore, of even the act of listening to somebody who has a different opinion is tantamount to my support of their position. And so that I am now kind of crossing the line and supporting something that I don't believe in. I wonder if you could talk about that from the perspective of having seen people have these conversations. Is that a valid fear, or what might actually arise if you were willing to take the risk to be courageous?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say about fear that my judgment of somebody's fear is not very relevant in that that fear has its effect and it is real enough to the person, and it's worth respecting that in all cases, I think. But it's an understandable fear from my perspective because we have built, I think, a culture of presumed fragility. I think there's something about social media and the way it works that makes us believe that seeing the wrong meme in the wrong moment can make us from a saint to a devil. that hearing from somebody an argument that makes sense for a moment might turn us into something we will regret. Mm-hmm. And what that tells me is not, what I see in that is not sort of a realistic evaluation of how persuasion works and how changing our mind actually works. What I see in that is one of the barriers, one of the many barriers to people coming together. We have, for some reason, convinced ourselves that we don't really have a constitution, that we don't have a strength and a foundation that is deep with roots all the way down. As I like to say, our opinions are formed from the experiences that we have had, mm-hmm. not from the last thing that we saw or, the very last person who got to talk to us. Oh my God, they were propaganda and now I'm converted. That's not how we work. So that's one thing, is like, if we're afraid that someone's going to convert us into something so unsavory to us, that makes no sense, because that's not going to happen. The only way that you would agree and really convert to somebody else's point of view because you heard something they said, and is if your ground was already fertile. Your mind was already fertile ground for that seed, and then it'll grow.
That's right.
So that will only happen when you are already right there at the edge, and it can be kind of beautiful. I would rather change my mind if it gets me closer to something that fits.
Yeah. It reminds me, so I grew up in a Jewish family around Chicago area, and there was the famous Nazi march in Skokie, Illinois, when I was, I don't know how old, I had no actual memory of it, but they applied for a permit, and there were a lot of folks who said, no, this shouldn't happen. This is, hate speech or what have you. But there was a big movement from the Jewish community that said, let them march. Yeah. And I've always really aligned and found that to be incredibly powerful. The recognition that whatever that belief structure is behind that march is already present.
Yeah.
And so to allow it to come out, to be seen, gives us the agency to respond, and is such a position of strength. It takes incredible strength to hear something you disagree with, and even more to consider something else. And it's only in the light of day that real change and alignment happens. And when we are misaligned or we feel unsafe because of a story in our head, our mental health suffers, our physical health suffers, we become less able to do the work of activism or policy change. Yeah. And it's a negative feedback loop. And so it is that bravery to hear something else is what opens it.
You're absolutely spot on. And this is one of the most radical things, because the last thing people want to do when faced with a position or an idea, held by a person that seems so wrong and threatening to them, the last thing they want to do is just accept the undeniable fact that that person holds that idea. That in order to accept that person in that moment, which will unlock your ability to interact with that person at all productively, you have to accept that situation. Here is a person who believes this thing, and you have to accept it.
Yeah.
And some people it's just too much. You can't even accept that person holds that view. You start to believe, as my friend Luis Mojica says, that until you change, I am not okay. Mm-hmm. Until you change, I cannot be okay, which means I can't even be in your presence. Yeah. And if I can't even be in your presence, how in the world am I ever going to show you the light of how I see things that could illuminate how you see things and could perhaps make the beautiful dynamic of persuasion do its work on you?
Yeah, that's right. And when we talk about turning your roadblocks to building blocks, it's exactly that. Don't give away your power, right? If you need someone to do anything for you to be anything, you've completely given away your power. Your power is being able to, as Byron Katie says, live with what is.
Yes.
Right? Every time we fight reality, we lose.
That's so true. And by the way, I just want to quickly say hi to, there's some folks in the chat who I know and saying hello. Wonderful to see you.
So with that, I did take some questions from audience members ahead of this. And I wanted to do at least one question from them. So this is from Andrew in Vermont. And he says, living in very liberal Vermont, we can fall into a bubble and literally never have to interact with MAGA conservatives. If we cannot have the conscious conversations that you, Monica, recommend, how do we ensure we don't get sucked into liberal complacency?
Wow, what an interesting question, and what an interesting angle to come at from. So thank you for that. And first of all, I think it's wonderful to have the wherewithal to look around your ecosystem and say, am I even able to talk with the people I mostly talk about? Am I even able to do that? And if you are not, it's not the end of the road at all. The internet, for all we attack it for, in the way that it exacerbates our polarization, is also an extraordinary opportunity to do just the opposite, to actually understand and begin to see. So if you've got no one, not a soul around you, then next time you see a headline that represents a perspective that is widely held and that you completely disagree with, read that, but instead of looking for ammo, which is what we tend to do, ask yourself 2 questions. What is the strongest argument on this side? In a way that I could articulate it to the author of this article, and that author would go, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So try to get there, and then ask yourself, what are the deep down human concerns animating this perspective? And can your mind, in its sanctity, in its integrity, no one can judge what you think because they can't see it. I love this about humanity. It's a sacred, beautiful space where we really can wrestle with things, safely and beautifully. Just what are the deep down human concerns here? And if you can name them, you'll probably see that you don't share that concern in this context, but you do share that concern in this other context. You relate to the values underneath it. You would just put them in a different order. And that is how you actually do expose yourself and allow other perspectives to teach you something, even if you don't have a flesh and blood human being right there.
Yeah. What I hear in that is take dominion over the tool that is the internet. Use it to practice reflective listening and empathy building, not needing to agree, but wanting to resource yourself with understanding.
Exactly. Because then you build the foundation that you might need when you do have the opportunity to engage with someone in a live way, in an unpredictable way. If you have done that work inside yourself, then it's just a lot less likely that you will come into that interaction so afraid or activated that you won't be capable of curiosity.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, man, 15 minutes flies by. I see why our episodes are much longer.
Yeah.
Do you have time for just 2 very quick hitters on the way out?
Yeah.
One practice, regular practice, could be daily, hourly, or weekly, probably not less than weekly, that has changed your life.
Daily meditation. I know that this has become a cliche. I know it. There's a lot of people out there talking about mental health, talking about centeredness and all these things, and you start to get to vocabulary that some people roll their eyes at. I get it. But these practices are thousands of years old, and they work, and they particularly, my daily meditation practice is about spending time in my own mind and being conscious of it so that it does not run away with me, so that I use my mind.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just get me into situations that I didn't even mean to be in.
Yeah. And for the listener, I rolled my eyes real hard at meditation, right up to the point where it beat me up and right into the point where it completely changed my life.
Yeah.
And whether it's, running, the number of things that are staples to my life and leadership that I once judged is immense. And at least in our work as a coach, the more the resistance, that's the arrow telling you where to apply it.
Exactly right. And I will say that, prayer, there's all these kinds of nourishing things people do. I happen to not be religious, and so meditation kind of does it for me. Yeah. But I know that prayer and faith does it for a lot of others.
Absolutely. Okay, so final question. It's the same question every guest on the show gets at the end, which is our audience, literally our audience, both. These are the humans in the arena, people making change. So if you were to leave them with just one thing, could be a quote, a practice, a resource, a podcast, anything at all, but just one thing that would best resource them to be a vector for healing our politics, what would it be?
Ooh. I just read Ender's Game to my kids with my husband. It was like family reading, and it was amazing. Ender's Game is an extraordinary science fiction classic. I can't recommend it enough. And there's a quote in there that basically says, your enemy is your teacher. Your enemy is your teacher. Yeah. And I took that out and I really applied it to our work. You know, your enemy's not your enemy, first of all. But if that's the way that you're seeing them, your opponent, your political opponent is not your enemy. Right. But they absolutely are your teacher. They absolutely are.
Oh, that's so beautiful. What an awesome place to end. Thank you for your time. To everyone watching, thank you for joining our first little mini installment episode of the Healing Our Politics podcast. And if you want to see more of this, if you want to see more of Monica, let us know, and maybe we'd be just so lucky. Thank you so much for what you do and who you are, regardless of what you do.
You too. Thanks, Skippy. These were great questions, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Ditto. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to put what you've heard here today into practice, sign up for our newsletter, The Leader's Handbook, where each month you'll receive just one email with a curated selection of the most useful tools and practices discussed on this podcast today and over the course of the last month, delivered in simple how-to worksheets, videos, and audio guides, so you and your teams can try and test these out in your own life and see what best serves you. And lastly, if you want to be a vector for healing our politics, if you want to do your part, take out your phone right now and share this podcast with 5 colleagues you care about. Send a simple text, drop a line, and leave the ball in their court. Because the truth is, the more those around you do their work, the better it will show up in your life, in your community, and in your world. Have a beautiful day. The Healing Our Politics podcast is brought to you by the Elected Leaders Collective, the first leading and most highly recognized name in mental health, well-being, and performance coaching for elected leaders and public servants, designed specifically for you. Now, don't be fooled by the name. The Elected Leaders Collective is not just for elected leaders. It is for all public servants, staffers, volunteers, government, nonprofit, whole organizations. This is for you. If you are filled with passion for improving your community and world, but are tired, as I am, of the anger, stress, and vitriol, if you find yourself banging your head against that same wall, struggling with the incoming criticism and threats, arguing with colleagues who are supposed to be on your team, and questioning if it's even worth it anymore, then the Elected Leaders Collective programming is specifically for you. With the Elected Leaders Collective, you will learn to become a #political healer, building the authentic, unshakable confidence and courage to stay true to yourself through the anger and pressure, while cultivating the open, empathetic mind to meet others with the curiosity, compassion, and kindness necessary to respond to threats, improve challenging relationships, de-escalate conflict, and bring people in your community together to solve real problems and get shit done. You'll reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, and become a more effective leader while having time for your family, yourself, your health, and your wealth, sleeping well at night, and showing others they can too. Now that's leadership. Healing Our Politics listeners receive 10% off all Elected Leaders Collective services using the code #PoliticalHealer. Use it today and become one of the brave political leaders healing our politics. Use code #PoliticalHealer by going to www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today. That's www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today.